Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the iHeartRadio network, the #1 network in the universe, and also Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe. According to them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America. Thank you so much for following Big C Sports, and also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Very romantic city, and there's no place I love more than Canada, outside of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south on Happy Valentine's Day, Big C?
Let me tell you, it's beautiful down here. I was down into Florida last night, and everything down here had to break a sweat. It's so warm. It's
Yeah.
degrees, man, you know. I had to leave my baby at the airport, so, she's going to be a little lonely. As dirty as she is, I don't have to worry about coming back and finding any dish in her door, because nobody wants to park their clothes and have to rub up against it.
That's funny. You know, you say that, and I've been saying that out here, and baseball started that pretty soon, and we got Madison Bumgarner, a pitcher that won the World Series for the San Francisco Giants. He's driving a lesser vehicle than the Escalade, but it's all muddy. I see everybody swamping now, Big C, and they're swamping in the wintertime, but you've been swamping even in the summer, Big C. So are they learning anything from you, Big C, or is it just an alternative advertisement, Big C?
Well, that's a reflection on the outreach of Big C Sports and everything. Everybody's paying attention. We got Firestone, we got Cadillac, we got the San Francisco Giants.
Yeah.
We got Ford cars. Everybody's paying attention to Big C Sports, and we appreciate it. Because we're real, we're bringing you what's real, we're not sugarcoating stuff. We're talking like the athletes talk, not like Donald Trump, but
Yeah.
like the athletes talk.
Yeah.
We're telling the truth.
Well, speaking of truth, I want to say that today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive it, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. And today is a happy Valentine's Day, so we want to say, happy Valentine's Day to all of the lovers around the world and people that really show their significant others, how much you mean. And based on that, I just want to say, everybody, go out and buy some chocolate for somebody and let people know, how much you feel about them. Big C, any special requests for your Valentine's Day, Big C?
Well, Charles, you talk about chocolate. There's only so much of me that'll go around.
That's funny, Big C. That's funny. Now I'm understanding that Escalade is not mud. You've been driving it through chocolate factories, Big C. Who was it, Willy Wonka and the chocolate factory, Big C? That's where you take the Escalade and park it, Big C? That's funny. But on a serious note, I want to say to all of you fathers out there on Valentine's Day, and just because you left or got out of Dodge, it doesn't mean that you left your worry behind. I think there was a Heat Wave that wrote a song called Rain Shine, Don't Mind, We're Riding on the Groove Line and Leave Your Trouble Behind. But there's an NFL player by the name of Robert Meacham, and he was just jailed, I believe, either today or yesterday for not paying over $400,000 in tax, I guess child support. He thought he could be like Donald Trump, Big C, but it doesn't work for everybody. What a Valentine's Day gift. You're going to jail because you owe $400,000. Big C, how do you owe $400,000 in child support, Big C? Your thoughts?
Oh, Charles, that's got to be a well-dressed child. Let me put it that way. I've always wondered about that. When you jail somebody for not paying child support,
wow.
How are they supposed to pay child support?
Yeah.
If he's incarcerated, and I'm not saying that there's people that don't need to be incarcerated in America.
Right.
We know there's a lot. But when you jail somebody who is not working for not paying child support, and Robert Meacham was cut over a year ago by the New Orleans Saints, so he's been unemployed.
Yeah.
And so there should be an automatic reduction in whatever
he
has to pay during that time. But to jail an individual, it costs them money for lawyer fees and various other entities and jail fees.
Yeah.
How does that benefit the person that you say he's not paying? Because you're locking him up and charging him for being locked up. But, our system of justice at sometimes is sick and twisted.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't benefit anybody. You can attach any type of payment he may be getting.
Yeah.
And garnish his wages if he has any. But locking him up, what good does that do for society? I mean, he's not a criminal, he's not a menace who's going out there committing crimes,
Yeah.
as we know what crimes are. But, it's a different way and level how they treat some athletes over the years, and they say a back payment that is due.
Yeah.
And yet, we don't hear these stories about mainstream Anglo-mean in America, because I know there's a lot of corporate people in America that don't pay child support, but yet they don't get locked up, Charles.
Yeah, I know that's exactly right, Big C. And I also want to say, as far as Big C Sports being the #1 sports show in the universe, that's been verified and documented by plagiarism, Big C. I do want to bring up the fact that, we talk about POTUS, and we touch everybody, even ourselves, and POTUS, who's he going to fire? We have Michael Flynn, who was doing some shenanigans with Russia and Vladimir Putin. Now, he's known about this for a long time. It was known by others that he knew about it on the 26th of January, but they went this long before they fired him. Now, let me ask you, this is the same guy that wants to sue federal judges and say they don't know what they're talking about, and he wants to hobnob with Vladimir Putin, Big C. So who's going to be fired next? Is it going to be Sean Spicer or Kellyanne Conway, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charles, he really needs to look in the mirror, because, he said he just found out about this. Okay?
Yeah.
The FBI knew about it on the 26th.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Flynn had been hanging out in Trump Towers even before he got elected president, okay?
Yeah.
So these communiques between the Russians and Flynn just didn't start when Trump was elected president. This was going on long before he was elected president. He was that go-between guy.
Yeah.
To find out the information for Trump. I don't care what you get in the media. Sometimes you got to believe what your eyes are telling you.
Yeah.
And so if you're associating with this guy and he's associating with the Russians, you're the guy that's speaking. And then Trump said something on the news just 2 days ago that was very troubling.
Yeah.
That he knew nothing about this.
Oh, yeah.
To the media. He knew nothing about this, standing next to his wife as they're getting on the plane.
Yeah.
He knew nothing about this, but yet he was brought to his attention by the FBI on the 26th of January.
Yeah.
I wonder how far will all the Trump backers continues to go with his continuous lies. This is not his television show, Joe.
Yeah.
Talking about you're fine, he's the boss, whatever the show was.
Yeah.
But this is the United States of America. This is not some hotel that he's running.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
He's got to get real. American public got to be real that they elected a fool, that they elected a scoundrel. And I'll say this because this is called freedom of speech.
Yeah.
If I'm lying, put me in jail.
Well, Big...
Just like they did with the wide receiver. But, this is a situation where this man is lying on national security.
Yeah.
With the American people. And even more so, lying about his staff, saying he didn't know it yet. Everything goes to him. Whatever's done.
Yeah, we've seen that. And, of course, CNN's all over it, as well as MSNBC. Even Rush Limbaugh was choking on his words the other day because he realized that Donald Trump trusts Putin more than he does the United States federal judges. Big C, I think that's a little bit crazy. And while he was at Mar-a-Lago down there in Florida, Big C, and, he's going to get rid of all the illegal immigrants, etc. There's a lot of groundkeepers that disappear when the cameras show up. But ironically, the gentleman, the Prime Minister of Japan, he was at Mar-a-Lago when I think it was North Korea that fired a missile at Japan. And they showed Donald Trump on a cell phone, Big C, as opposed to getting up out of there and trying to see if we have a national crisis going on. Big C, your thoughts with POTUS?
Well, this is the first president that's never had a secured line, a secured room. He sits there and talks on a cell phone.
Yeah.
Like he's in a Starbucks coffee shop.
Right. Right.
With everybody else around with cameras on and taking pictures of the event to illuminate the tables.
Yes.
What, he couldn't pay the power bill down there or something?
Maybe not.
You're supposed to have a secured area that you go off to in a situation of national emergency. That's
Yes.
a national emergency. You don't sit at some lounge table at a bar, wanting to talk about national security. People saying, well, you got to give him a chance. This is his first time. Every president has been their first time, Charles.
Yeah.
But this is the first time we've elected a fool as president.
Well,
and I don't care what party affiliation they have, even the Republicans in the Congress are
Yeah.
realizing that.
Oh, yeah, and even more egregious, Big C, we've had Russia, they rolled out a nuclear missile. It's a secret missile that no one knew about it, but it violates a treaty that was in place since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Also, they have a spy ship off the coast of Delaware. That's part of the United States for you good old boys up in the Northeast that voted for this guy. Tom Brady and Tom Brady and Kraft, they may know where Delaware is, Big C, but that's where the nucleus of them is from the Russia. So when we talk about, real talk, that is real talk. We're not just dumb sports guys, Big C. But speaking of some of the dumb sports guys, if that's all they want to cover, I want you to keep this in mind. This segment is sponsored by the California Lottery, and I'm talking about a $350 million prize, Big C. That's the same kind of money that a lot of the people in the Trump administration have, Big C. So maybe you and I can be the next ones in the administration when some of those good old boys are fired. But I want to ask you, what would you do with $300 million, Big C? Yeah.
That's what it's all about, having a dollar in your pocket.
Yeah.
And not having any knowledge of national security. That's what it seems to be, is everybody's bought their way into his cabinet.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that they're not giving him kickbacks and money's not being funneled, for his personal wealth gain.
Yeah.
To put this country, the great United States of America, after all the presidents we've had 44 presidents
that
have thought about America. Even Richard Nixon thought about America.
Yeah.
But to have somebody here, and everybody said, well, he's a businessman. Yes, he is. America is not a business. It's a country. And you can't run it, like I said, like a hotel or a restaurant.
Yeah.
This is not how business is done in America. Politics is number one in American society. It is the crux of our nation, and that's how everything is built.
Yeah.
You can say that politics is dirty. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But when you got a buffoon running the politics and then talking about draining the swamp, Charlton, he opened up the cesspool.
Yeah.
The swamp. He opened up the cesspool.
Well, all these good old boys that voted for POTUS, and I've been Democrat and Republican at different times in my life, but this is the same president that owns sports teams, and his son-in-law is affiliated with someone trying to buy the Florida Marlins, the Miami Marlins, down the baseball team of Major League Baseball. Also, we know he was part of the New Jersey Generals. We own them, tried to buy the Buffalo Bills. But just keep in mind, guys, this is the same guy that said he's going to bring back jobs to America. He's already firing people from his administration that are dealing with Putin. And Big C, the reason he won't talk about Putin is because he owns 20% in a Russian bank, and he doesn't want Putin to release. So Putin has him by the same place that he likes to grab women, Big C. You can let your mind do the thinking on that. But I want to just touch a little bit on some of the great things that happened over the weekend and this great holiday season, President's Holiday. I want to say congratulations and happy birthday to Coach Krzyzewski. It's hard for me to say his name, Krzyzewski, Mike Krzyzewski. Which one is it, Big C? Is it Krzyzewski or Krzyzewski?
I think it's Krzyzewski, Charlton. He's the leader of the Duke. He's crazy.
Yeah.
This man has had several NCAA championships, Charlton.
Yeah.
He's had Olympic championships, World Game championships. And not only that, Charlton, he graduates players.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. And you think about the rivalry he has down there on Tobacco Road with North Carolina. Those two teams are synonymous in NCAA men's basketball.
Yeah.
But Krzyzewski has always been a leader.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at the players that he has turned out over his time, we talk about one of his alumnus on a regular basis, Jay Billis, Charlton, who is a fine attorney and broadcaster for ESPN, who has been an advocate for men's basketball players getting paid, college athletes getting paid, because it's antitrust not to pay them with the money that they're making. But that came from the tutelage of a Mike Krzyzewski to understand, having that type of knowledge to go out and try to represent others. And you think about the long tail of great players that he's had in the NBA, Charlton.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. But, great congratulations to Krzyzewski and his time there at Duke and his 70th birthday celebration.
Well, I tell you, that's a great celebration. And along the great line of coaches, and we know we're coming up on March Madness, coming up in just about a month away, Big C, and everybody's excited about that. But we talked about it yesterday on the program, before the basketball game happened with Coach Auriemma, which is maybe the best coach, period. Nobody wins 100 games in anything. Even the great De La Salle High School out here in Northern California, they had a win streak of 151 games, but they were playing high school kids, Big C. But this guy, he's taking the women's basketball team, and they're beating women, and they're doing it decisively. Just congratulations on him and what that means in the annals of sports, Big C. I think it's just bigger than he's coaching women's basketball. he's probably the greatest coach in the world, at least in the United States, when it comes to winning. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Coach Ryan Johnson, with his accomplishment last night of his 100 consecutive victories, and he has two young ladies that have been on that team for all 100 of them, Johnson.
Yeah.
But when you think about that, we talk about coaches keeping players around and graduating players. Just that feat within itself, Johnson, the first two females in the history of college professional sports of any time to have 100 consecutive victories.
Yeah.
But he plays the top teams. Last night he played South Carolina. I think they're ranked number 3 in the country.
They were number 6 at the time. Yeah, number 6 at the time.
Well, but they don't know one, Charlton.
Yeah.
They play everybody. They play the schedule. But to have that type of consistency, Charlton, to be able to deliver a consistent message to your players and them being able to understand it, and they take the product out on the court, Charlton, and execute it. You know, to have that understanding, that maturity.
Yeah.
And that's what these players exude. This shows you where the leaders of America come from. Not because of sex, Charlton, but because of what they are, mentality-wise. The intelligence that these young ladies exude, night in, night out, year in, year out, within that program. You know, when you think about, there was a show when I grew up, Charlton, it was called Father Knows Best.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and this is what Gina Mariama brings to the ladies' game.
Yeah.
You know, he's like a father to all these young women that have passed under his tutelage of his time at UConn. And when you say Father Knows Best, he's a father to these young ladies. And he gives them the right message. And yes, Charlton, they can go out and execute it. That means he knows how to deliver that message and mentor and tutor these young ladies. And all the congratulations, kudos in the world to Coach Ariema on this 100 consecutive victory.
And Big C, when you think about that, you know, people talk about the great John Wooden, and I think right now John Wooden, you know, posthumously was the best coach in the history of men's basketball. But when you look at women's basketball, and I include them both together, if you can win that many games without losing the game, you have to be on point every single night. You got to have players who maybe have some slight injuries, players that may have some, obviously they go to college, Big C, at UConn, but he's managed to do that. What parent would not be proud to send their kid to UConn? When we contrast that, not to open up a wound here on Valentine's Day, but you have the great Jerry Sandusky under the former great Joe Paterno, and you know what happened up there at Penn State, just a horrible situation, taking advantage of young people. But even Sandusky's son, I think the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Big C, your thoughts?
No, he doesn't. And yesterday, Jerry Sandusky's son was arrested by the FBI on 14 counts of lewd act and molestation of children lured over the internet, you know, and it's been an ongoing investigation with him. So I'm believing that he learned from his dad how to perpetrate these offenses, and, you know, it's sad, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, you have these predators out there in American society. You know, I look at our president who is talking about going after people who have come into this country as immigrants and, you know, seeking a better life, and yet the people that he should be seeking out are people like the Sanduskys, who are more dangerous to American society. He's talking about terrorists. These people are terrorists and predators.
Wait, hold on, Big C. Are you saying that Sandusky, he was not on that terrorist ban list, Big C? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying, Charlton, these are the type of people that they need to spend more time vetting. These people that are preying around on the internet, searching out these young children on these websites, Charlton, you know, playing around as they're children. You know by somebody's ESPN number on their internet account, Charlton, who they are and what they are. And you know, you have to have at least 14 victims before you catch someone, Charlton.
Wow.
It doesn't take that many victims to catch somebody. They knew from this guy's father's past what type of individual he was. He had been in the same house, doing the same things with his father. They probably did them together, and I'll stand by that, Charlton, because somebody has to prove it wrong. But this guy is a predator, like his father. We spend too much time focusing on the wrong people in America instead of protecting the children of America.
Well, you know, and when you bring that up and we talk about terrorism and crimes and how Donald Trump loves Putin but doesn't trust federal judges in the United States, and they're still talking about building the wall between the United States and Mexico, not Canada. He just visited with the Canadian Prime Minister just last week, but that wall they want to build between the United States and Canada because he wants to keep the bad guys out. Well, again, Russia has a nuclear ship offside the coast of Delaware. Are they going to build a wall in the Atlantic Ocean too, Big C, or will they just turn a blind eye to anything that comes from the Russian, Big C, in that part of the world, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, we're turning a blind eye, Charlton, to any certain ethnicity when it comes to that. I'll go back to this Sandusky scenario. People say that politics and sports don't mix. How did Jerry Sandusky get a chance to get so many young men in America? It was through sports, Charlton.
Yeah.
And what covered it up was the politics.
Yep.
Politics covered it up because the politics of not, managing Joe Pop and tarnishing his legacy covered it up.
Yeah.
The political side of that let so many more young men be abused. And it's once again, I gotta believe that the political part of this let so many other young men be abused. You don't build a case getting up to 14. You had a case with one person being abused, Charlton. You didn't need to get past a dozen. Law enforcement, which is politics, knew what had been going on with this man, this sick individual.
Yeah.
To minimize young people like that, Charlton. This was his dad utilized sports.
Yeah.
To victimize these young children that parents entrusted. Parents do this all over America every day, Charlton. They entrust their children to these young men, and most of them, they have no background check. I feel that every youth coach, every coach in America should have to go through FBI.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Every one of them. They need to go through a scrutinizing of an FBI background check, Charlton, before you can deal with young children, whether it's male or female. And I don't care if it's a male or female coach.
Yeah.
You need to go through a background check covered by the FBI so you can coach in any kind of youth sports in America.
And speaking of the background checks, and again, POTUS, Donald Trump, whether people say that the president is really Bannon or Donald Trump, trying to find out how to keep terrorists out of America, and his own cabinet. Michael Flynn's known as a spy, communicating with Russia on how to interfere with the United States elections. How's a man going to mind someone around the world when he can't even take care of his own backyard, Big C? And speaking of taking care of his own backyard, I want to say this segment is sponsored by United Labor Guaranteed Life Insurance up to $100,000. We are also endorsed by the American Heart Association and the American Cancer Society. We work with all of the unions in the country under the AFL-CIO, and we're looking to hire over 1,000 licensed insurance brokers because we want to put people back to work. I'm also brokered with One Life America, and we're looking to hire 1,000 brokers, and we will pay your E&O up to $1 million per agent. That's $1 million per agent. Now, who does that? Big C Sports does it. That's who, Big C. When we go back around the globe and we look at what's happening in the world of sports, you know how we just had this... Yeah, Big C. Yeah.
I want to call on our brother. I want to call on Fox Sports, okay? I want to call on ESPN because you're the worldwide leader.
Yeah.
I want you to go out there and be an advocate for the youth of America. I want you to go out and say that there needs to be FBI background checks on every coach in youth sports, regardless whether it's baseball, gymnastics, and we know this is happening in gymnastics, Charlton.
Yeah. Oh, it just happened, yeah.
Back in the summer, over 200 allegations of sexual misconduct with young female gymnasts. So we need to have those people speak up. Don't sit there because you're getting this big paycheck.
Yeah.
Hey, that's not us. We're not going to touch that. No, you have to touch it because these men and women have been touching the wrong people, okay?
Yeah.
They've been touching kids, and that's inappropriate in America. That's a criminal offense. We want to talk about true criminals. Those are criminals. So I call on Fox Sports. I call on ESPN Sports to push for FBI background checks. Everybody coaching youth sports, Charlton, because somebody has to try to protect the children, because we are turning our children over to these vicious animals.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening. So you people talk about being leaders, and you might not be getting paid for that, but at least step up for the kids.
Well, Big C, that's an ironic point that you bring up with the Sandusky and these kids being sexually assaulted, and we have a man in the White House who bragged about grabbing women by the vagina, and he still became president. And now he's about to fire everybody in his administration because none of them can trust each other. It's like it's like the guys that go out and they rob a store or they rob whatever they rob, and they start telling on each other, and when they get caught, they start dropping dime on the person that helped them. And that reminds me of the Trump administration. So when we have a guy who brags about sexual assault, we have Sandusky's son going to, I guess he was arrested just recently, and we know what happened with Paterno and Sandusky. With Donald Trump he can't speak out against sexual assault, Big C, because no one would trust anything that comes out of his mouth. So just keep that in mind. It is Sports and Politics. We brought it to you every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. And Big C, I do want to compliment something that's good about sports right now. And we talked about it last week. In fact, you just brought it up last week. We were talking about the rift that's happening in Madison Square Garden with the ownership in Madison Square Garden. And you have Adam Silver, the commissioner, and you have Mike Dolan, who owns the New York Knicks, and then Charles Oakley, that fiasco. They let it get too far out of hand. Someone has to be the bigger person, Big C. So I commend Adam Silver for stepping in. I think he even talked to Michael Jordan, and they sat down like people do, like adults do, Big C. And now I guess they lifted the ban on Oakley. But why did it take so long, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, this is Adam Silver, Charleston, being a leader in professional sports leagues as a commissioner, stepping up, knowing that this man has done something that's wrong. Here it is. Charles Oakley pays for his own tickets. He's not getting a freebie to come into Madison Square Garden. So he has the liberties that any fan in that facility has, Charleston, to sit there and voice his opinion.
Yeah.
Adam Silver took exception to it, but he cannot because he's a private citizen. He's not tied to the organization. But I commend Commissioner Silver and Michael Jordan for getting on a conference call, against Adam Silver.
Yeah.
And telling them that it was wrong. They were being grown men. Telling them that it was wrong. But even Silver crossed the line today, Charleston, this morning. He goes on a talk show and calls Charles Oakley an alcoholic. It was this morning or yesterday that he did it. Call a man an alcoholic.
Was that Mike Dolan that did that? See, Mike Dolan?
Mike Dolan, the owner of the Knicks, going out making blatant claims that a man is an alcoholic.
Wow.
And Dolan's a friend of Donald Trump. So you think about the underlying racial current that goes there, Charleston.
Yeah.
That you're blatantly out there calling a man an alcoholic, and yet you don't run in the same social circle.
Yeah.
I don't hear him calling Jerry Jones an alcoholic. I don't hear him calling Robert Kraft an alcoholic. These are owners of other organizations that we see sitting drinking on television.
Yeah.
And are slurring their words.
Yeah.
But he's going to call Charles Oakley this, who is sitting there peacefully in the stands at Madison Square Garden before being accosted. And when you look at the scene around Oakley, there's 6 to 8 white police and security people around Oakley dragging this black man out of the arena, Charles.
Kind of like the images of Rodney King, Big C, back in Los Angeles back in the day, Big C.
Yeah, you sent in a goon squad of whites to abuse a fan. We've never seen that before, Charleston, that 8 white officers go attack a fan in the stands and drag it out of an arena.
No.
I don't care what kind of sport you're watching, basketball, football, baseball, hockey. We've never seen that before.
You've never seen it happen with John McEnroe, who was one of the most outspoken, even though a great tennis player, one of the most outspoken, I guess, sportsmen in the history of our country, Big C, but there's always somebody who can go above the top. Yeah.
Look at Bobby Knight.
Oh, yeah, throwing chairs.
Across the basketball
Yeah.
court. There weren't 8 white security guards grabbing him, dragging him out of the arena. They let him walk out peacefully.
Wow.
You see, there's so many occasions, Charlton, where white men have gone out and been belligerent and physical, and they've let them walk out, no more than 1 or 2 officers assisting them.
Yeah.
But you're dragging a man down to the floor, and he's known by everybody in the arena.
Well, Big C, that's a powerful statement. This is Black History Month, and I'm so proud of the black men that stand up and say what's right. We know it's only about 20% of us. The others are looking at how they can keep a job. They couldn't care less about how life is safer for their children down the road, Big C. But you just brought up a point that, and like I said, it reminded me of Rodney King when you get pulled over, there's like 1 police officer or 2 CHP cars. But not 16 guys getting out of a car with billy clubs and guns and everything else they have. And I know they have a tough job, but that's called excessive force. And for all the people that were siding with Madison Square Garden and Mike Dolan, think about this. Sandusky and Paterno, they never had 12 officers surround them and drag them out of the locker rooms where they were molesting children. But they attack a black man, an African-American man in broad daylight. And for all you guys who are too knuckleheads to understand, that's what it looks like when you get stopped and frisked. They were treating Oakley like garbage in front of 20,000 people at Madison Square Garden. Now, Oakley may still be a millionaire, I don't know. But imagine the average young African-American boy that says they roughed me up or they were stalking me or profiling me. and nobody believes him. And now there are even people that saying Oakley was the one at fault because he was forced to defend himself against some of the things that happened. It was not just a one-time incident.
Well, Charles, the thing about this, you spoke about Sandusky.
Yeah.
They didn't have a half dozen officers beating down a child molester, okay?
No.
They didn't have that. But Charles Oakley was standing there in the suit. He's still a professional man. I know Charles.
Yeah.
And he's in town on a regular basis. So he's flying, so he's got money to buy airlines. He has money to buy seats in Madison Square Garden, which are not cheap.
Yeah.
He lives in New York City, which is not a low-rent district, okay, Charles? So financially, he's okay. He played a long time in the NBA, over a decade. And so when you look at the treatment that he had, and like I said, we saw this on television. We didn't see the television cameras go in while they were arresting this child molester in Sandusky.
No.
Dragging him out, They just put handcuffs on his leg and walk like a human being.
Wow.
He treated Oakley like a dog, okay? He wasn't molesting children. He was sitting in the stands like the rest of the fans. But as a child molester like that, in that region of the country, you get a pass on how you're treated by law enforcement.
And that's the same thing. We have a president who's tough on crime, and we know this is Valentine's Day, but this is also a day that we got to understand that abuse still happens in this country. It happens to boys and it happens to girls, and it takes someone with character to speak up against it. We got to put a stop to it, not just against the women who are battered, but on this day of celebration and people buying chocolates and candy for people that they care about. And sometimes for a lot of you husbands out there, you're buying chocolates for your wives and girlfriends, and a lot of you girlfriends or wives, you're buying chocolates for a lot of your boyfriends and husbands too. I just heard that story out of Florida. I have a friend who's a florist, and she tells me these funny stories about some of these guys that come in and they're the pillars of their community, but they got flowers for their spouse, Big C. They also got flowers for a girlfriend or two, Big C. Does that go on in the South, or is it just something in California, Big C?
Well, like I said, I got enough chocolate to go around. I don't have anybody
Yeah. It makes me wonder if POTUS is going to buy flowers for Kellyanne Conway based on that back rub she gave him back in the day. I think it made Spicer a little bit unhappy, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Kellyanne Conway, somebody needs to buy her a little something, Charles. That's stand in the sun like a boiling little can.
Oh, man.
But, I think this alternative truth thing is trying to catch up with it, Charles. She can't keep the story straight, whether it's the alternative truth or the fake truth or the real truth.
That's funny.
And this is the way our country is going. I mean, I look at sports and I look at our country, Charles, and you look at the Sandusky story, you look at the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an embarrassment for America.
Yeah. It's funny how,
laughing stock all around.
you know how when someone starts lying, they start trying to repeat themselves a lot, as if they tell you enough, you're going to start believing it. Listen to Sean Spicer when he talks. Whenever he sits in front of the press, he gets so angry and repeats himself over and over and over again. It's like saying, no, this quarter only had heads. There's no tails to it. It's funny when I watch that, and now they're all turning against each other. And POTUS said he was going to drain the swamp, but he forgot to tell us he's going to start with his own administration. I think that's funny. And speaking of draining the swamp, we talked about how great Adam Silver is for the NBA. There are only 6 NBA players that have made at least 2,000 three-point baskets, and they started the three-point basket in 1979. I like to call this man by the appropriate movie name with the great Spike Lee. Jesus Shuttleworth is number 1, otherwise known as Ray Allen. Big C, your thoughts on Jesus Shuttleworth when he played the movie He Got Game, Big C? Rick Fox was in there, as well as Denzel Washington. Also, Lala, who was Carmelo Anthony's wife. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there's still a bounty out on him in San Antonio.
Yeah.
He can't go to Texas, so that's a big part of his retirement, because there was a couple of games in Texas, so he with Dallas and San Antonio.
Yeah.
Get back into the state.
And there's still a couple of good old boys down in Texas. They still swear that he stepped on the line when he hit that three. Big C, your thoughts?
Ray was a great shooter, John. We seen him cross over into a couple movie roles, but that dead-eye shot he had with the Seattle Supersonics moving on throughout his career. Boston Celtics, Charlton, as well as what we saw him do with the Miami Heat. Just one of the great sure shots of the NBA history. And, it takes a lot of father to be able to do that, Charlton, to go in night in, night out. Players know what you come on the court for, that you're that hired gun and knock it down. And, he sets the table for a lot of great players over time, Charlton.
Oh, yeah, and then another guy on the I guess, second in command, who may have had the only NBA career where his sister was better than him in the backyard, and that's the great Reggie Miller, who also gave the choke sign. I guess it was against the New York Knicks back in the day at Madison Square Garden. But you know, Reggie Miller was great out of UCLA, also known as a clutch shooter, Big C, one of the clutch three-point guys in the history of the NBA. Your thoughts on the great Reggie Miller? I think he only weighed about 120 pounds, Big C. Your thoughts?
Played with some great teams, but during an era in time that, we had Michael playing in the NBA, and so the East in the NBA was always a tough road. You had the Knicks, you had the Bulls, you had the Pistons, and you had the Pacers. And so, but he was a true leader of that team, Charlton, one of the big teams of the NBA at that time, and brought a lot of prominence to the state of Indiana. Reggie Miller by himself.
Yeah.
He was a gamer that he could fill it up from anywhere on the floor.
Well, I tell you, and you know how we talk about him coming out of the great UCLA, and he played for the Bruins basketball program is back now. It's great to see UCLA in the mix, but Reggie Miller, when you think about him, you throw in the names Lou Alcindor at the time, Big C, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar later. You throw in the great Bill Walton. So many great players have come out of UCLA, so that's good to see that program back on track. Another player that may not have the same kind of notoriety, that was also one of the top NBA players that could shoot threes, Big C, is Jason Terry. Doesn't have the same cachet as a Ray Allen or Jesus Soderbergh or a Reggie Miller, but Jason Terry, he could also knock it down from 3 points. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Jason Terry was a tremendous guard in the NBA, but I want to take a step back to UCLA when you were talking about some great players in the past.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Tyus Indy, Charlton.
Oh, yeah.
Guard from UCLA 30 years ago today. He had one of the greatest, court-to-court, layups in basketball history. Only Danny Ainge could equal that. He did it 39 years ago tomorrow.
Yeah.
But Tyus Indy in an NCAA game, from one end of the court to the other, laid it up in 4 seconds.
That was against Missouri at the Oakland Coliseum. I remember that March Madness. Yeah.
Propelled UCLA to the next round of the playoffs. When you think about Jason Terry, Jonathan, this is a guy who was only 6'2", who could fill it up in the NBA, and he was fearless. You think about that. We talked about Reggie Miller. He was 6'7", but Jason Terry had to play amongst the trees all the time. So when the 3-point circle came out, Jonathan, and he was able to step back and fire, it prolonged his NBA career.
Yeah, that's true, Big C. Another great Bruin that really has made a name for himself in the world of basketball. Now, the next guy is known as the Truth. The great Paul Pierce. I believe he's out of Southern California, Big C. He won a championship with the Boston Celtics under the great Doc Rivers, and now he's doing his thing for the LA Clippers, Big C. But just your thought on the great Paul Pierce. He also played for the Wizards, and they call him the Truth. Your thoughts on him, Big C?
Well, you think about Paul Pierce. Been around the NBA for almost 20 years, Jonathan. This was a guy who grew up in Southern California.
Yeah.
Ended up playing at the University of Kansas, Jonathan, and under the great Larry Brown out there. Just one of the greatest coaches in college and even in NBA history.
Oh, yeah.
And he developed so many great players. Danny Manning won a national championship with him out there in Kansas. Paul Pierce had longevity with the Celtics. You think about all the Celtics greats of the past, Jonathan.
Yeah.
He's supplanted all of them as the all-time leading scorer. The Larry Bird, the Casey Jones, the Bill Russell, the Bob Cousy.
Hall of Famers.
Hall of Famers, as well as Paul Pierce will eventually be a Hall of Famer. But he was such a clutch player, Jonathan. He finally won an NBA title when they brought in, Kevin Garnett, and they had Doc Rivers as coach. He spent a long time there in Boston rekindling that franchise.
Well, Big C, now, when you think about these great guys, because everybody thinks of Klay Thompson, and they think of Steph Curry. Well, Steph Curry's father, Dale Curry, he can also knock down threes because he can still fill it from three, and he's a broadcaster right now for Charlotte. But I look at another player who doesn't seem to get old with time. He's like fine wine out here in California. I think he gets better with age. I remember this guy hanging on the rim with his elbow at the Oakland Coliseum in the 2000 All-Star season, sitting there among a lot of the fans who were just awestruck about how this guy, Carter, was not the tallest guy in the league, but as far as being an athlete, he can still hit threes, Big C. Vince Carter played up in Toronto. Also, he's just been all over the league playing, I believe, lately, or most recently at Memphis. Your thoughts on the great Vince Carter? I think he's almost as old as Tiger Woods, Big C, doing his thing. Your thoughts?
You think about Vince Carter, Charlton out of North Carolina, one of the Tar Heels that we've talked so much about, one of Dean's best players back there over the years. He was the #1 draft pick in the NBA. He played with the Nets. He played with Toronto. You know, he's played around with Dallas. You know, he's been around the league, but he's always been a consistent player. Actually, he's a cousin came into the league at the same time as first cousin, Tracy McGrady.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those two players, you know, were dominant players in their early years in the NBA. Vince Carter had his longevity of a career. He never got that championship that he saw Charlton, but he stayed around for a long time, a consistent all-star, a consistent fan favorite. And you wouldn't think about it because, you know, he was 6'5", he was that tweener player.
Yeah.
But he had such great athleticism, Charlton, that he could just create his own shot. And to be ranking that high in the three-point floor, just a tremendous talent in the NBA.
Well, Big C, the last one on the list of the 6 players in the NBA to score 2,000 three-pointers, doesn't have the same cachet, doesn't have the same success as some of these other players, but I think of none other than the great Jamal Crawford, a guy that's consistent over the years, but he just doesn't have the shine. What do you call it? Some guys have that it factor. You know how it is when you walk into a bar back in the day and all the women flock to you kind of like mud on your Escalade, Big C. He doesn't have the same it factor as Jesus Sutterworth or Reggie Miller or Jason Terry, and Vince Carter may be the most it factor, the guy that just has it, probably more than all of them, but the great Jamal Crawford, your thoughts on him, Big C?
Well, you know, Charlton being in the right place at the right time, you know, a lot of a player's success will depend on whether he was on a championship team or even in the championship hunt.
Yeah.
That's what we look at, and so often players are gauged by that, which is wrong. We don't gauge a guy by what all his content is into the game, because there's been so many great players in the past that never won championships.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you think about what their contribution was to the league versus just being a scorer,
yeah.
Jamal Crawford, you know, he just did not get with the right organization.
Yeah.
People always talk about Charles Barkley, how great a player he is or was. Never won a championship, though. So, you know, there's one of those players that chase it around and can never get there.
Yeah.
But, you know, you look at a player's accolades on the court. That's what you give them credit for, not about their marketability. And Jamal Crawford deserves to be on that list, taking all those shots, Joe.
Big C, let me just bring some modern players in, because all those guys that did it back in the day, they did it, and I guess the NBA allowed you to be more physical back in the day. Now, when you look at Steph Curry, who's had more three-point baskets in a season than anyone in the history of the NBA, he even breaks his own records at Big C. And you have Klay Thompson, you have Durant, they're knocking down threes. Harden can knock down threes. And then Kawhi Leonard, he's also good at knocking down threes. So if you were to have a guy that you wanted the ball in his hands, let's say you got 10 seconds left in the game. We're talking about Tyus Edney going court to court with about 4 seconds for the great UCLA. And a lot of people might say Steph Curry, but if you had one player and you wanted to win the shot, you're down by 1 point. Game 7 NBA Finals, a lot of guys played that game back in the day when we were kids. Now, who would you want the ball in, Big C? A guy with 10 seconds left, down by 1, you need a 3.
Well, Charlton, I'm going to give you 2 players, not 1. I'm going to give you 2 players. And they both play different positions, different heights.
Yeah.
One, you might know of him, Robert Horry.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Horry, big shot Bob, you know, was his folklore in the NBA. 6'10", shooting forward, you know, in the NBA, had 7 NBA championship rings. So when you talk about a guy that you want making that key shot, I want Robert Horry, because beyond any player you see in the game today, he made more of them in clutch situations.
Yeah.
Number 2 on my list, Charlton, is a team that doesn't exist anymore. He's now in Oklahoma City, played in Seattle. A guy named Downtown Freddie Brown.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to me, in my era, he was the best shooter from the outside. I mean, he was Mr. Clutch. He'd plant it down in the corner.
Yeah.
They did it to him before Ray Allen got to Seattle. There was Freddie Brown. And this man was ice water. So, you know, people who know the NBA game will recognize those 2 players, not the ESPN generation.
Yeah.
But they will recognize those 2 players, Robert Horry and especially Downtown Freddie Brown.
Well, Big C, I want to say this segment is sponsored by Athletic Insurance with Big C Sports through Ben and Mark. If you are a professional sports team or college team or a high school team, even your mom and pop soccer leagues, you need athletic or event insurance. And Big C Sports can get you covered in all 50 states in the United States of America. Tweet out to us on the iHeartRadio network every Monday through Friday. at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time worldwide on the iHeartRadio network. Big C, we know we talk about a lot of the athletes that have done great, and maybe their name's even going to be a Hall of Fame name. But something I want you to just touch base on is we transition a little bit to football. We just had the Super Bowl in, and what a great Super Bowl it was, Super Bowl 51. One of the teams that had a lot of, I guess, strife throughout the season, Big C, even though they were a good team, the New York Giants, they just let go of Victor Cruz, Big C. It goes to show you that players are only as good as the game they're playing or the year that they're playing, because any year you can be cut. He'll probably find another team, but your thoughts on how cutthroat the NFL can be, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Jonathan, I think, when we look prior to their loss to the Green Bay Packers, the New York Giants receiving corps had started being blamed for their potential loss to the Packers.
Yeah.
Saying that it was their fault. It wasn't going to be on the quarterback if he couldn't get the ball to him.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be on the quarterback if he threw an interception. It was going to be the receiver's fault if they didn't get open.
Yeah.
They were open, he couldn't get the ball to him. But Victor Cruz, he was one of the more dominant receivers in the NFL. So if you think about from 2011 to 2013, he averaged 80 receptions and 1,200 yards a season. He had that devastating knee injury a couple of years back that slowed him down a bit, Jonathan. But this past season, he still had over 50 receptions, which is not bad for an NFL receiver, and you still have another superstar receiver on the team in Victor Cruz. But you think about his 7-year Giant career, Jonathan. This guy has 303 receptions.
Yeah.
Over 4,500 yards, Jonathan.
Wow.
That's not bad. And you said this guy becomes expendable. Well, he's too good of a player, Jonathan, to be unemployed too long. And I can think of some teams that could really use a receiver like a Victor Cruz. What is New Orleans Saints?
Yeah.
How much would he upgrade their receiving corps with that great quarterback they have out there, and Drew Brees? Think about what he could do for the San Francisco 49ers that need a go-to receiver.
Yeah.
Even the Seattle Seahawks, Jonathan, who would really upgrade their receiving corps. There's some holes for Victor Cruz to land in. He's just got to be willing to move out of New Jersey. That's where he grew up. You think about it. He was a local kid, Jonathan, grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, and played for the New York Giants. How much of a success story can you ever have in the world of professional sports?
Yeah.
To never leave home and to play for your hometown team.
Well, Big C, that's every kid's dream, to grow up and play in their own backyard. And the modern day version we have of that is the great LeBron James out of Akron, Ohio, playing it. I think it was at St. Vincent, St. Mary's High School back in the day, and now he's playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So Cruz will land on his feet, as a lot of guys do when you have talent. And even in the NBA, Serge Ibaka, there's a trade that was made for him today, just today, with the Toronto Raptors. So, and they're going to get a couple of draft picks from the Orlando Big C. But everybody talks about this game is a business. It's not just a game. It's something that you've always talked about, and you brought it to my mind. This is a business, and I remember all the hatred that the fans had in Oklahoma City when Durant went back home, and it was a little bit emotional for him at times, but the fans who loved him, they also are the same fans that booed him. Kind of like that same woman that you fall in love with, and she ends up dating your roommate in college. You know how she always shows up at your college when you're not there, and your roommate doesn't mind because he's sending her Valentine's Day gifts too. Big C, your thoughts?
You think about that scenario with Serge Ibaka.
Yeah.
Nobody booed him when he went back to Toronto.
No.
Back to Oklahoma City playing for Orlando.
Yeah.
Okay, but he was only the third cog in that wheel there in OKC.
Yeah.
But you gotta look at how Toronto now, Charlton, has really upgraded their team.
Oh, yeah.
You look at the Cavaliers. They've lost Kevin Love for possibly the next 6 weeks.
6 weeks, yeah.
And now Serge Ibaka is healthy, going to a Toronto team that was second in the East. And so they really upgraded because they only had to give up a bench player plus a first-round draft pick next year. You never know what's going to happen with a first-round draft pick. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah.
Ben Simmons hasn't played one game yet. It took, Nerlens Noel 2 years to get on the court. And it took the kid that they drafted out of Kansas another year. So
yeah.
They had 3 consecutive number 1 overall draft picks and only got a year and a half out of them, Jonathan. So that's not good productivity. So if you take Serge Ibaka, a proven forward, former All-Star, and put him into your lineup, and you put this big cog of 7 feet in the middle of your defense,
yeah.
who can score?
Yeah.
So Toronto has done a tremendous upgrade of their organization, and Cleveland now has to worry they may not have
Well, that's true, Big C. You're always shuffling. There's a song called "Every Day I'm Shuffling, Every Day I'm Hustling," and that's the life. Yeah. Okay. That's funny, Big Z. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to sing. Hey, I heard it was one of the great. So once you get used to listening to Lady Gaga, you saying you don't want to hear Charlton try to turn those pipes on too, Big Z? Hey, it was the great actor, the great comedian Eddie Murphy that said, if you want to make somebody happy, sing. He said, if you want to get women sing. Donald Trump said, no, just get Tic Tacs. You get the same result, Big C. But hey, don't laugh too much. I might be opening for Chris Rock. He's going to be going on a tour again, I believe, this summer. Yeah. Well, he didn't tell me. I didn't read the fine print. Maybe that's what he was going to do. Open the door, Big C. I got to get back with Chris Rock for that, Big C. But I also want to say this final segment is sponsored by Business Credit. If you're looking to get business funding, you got to get Business Credit. Tweet out the Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network. We're also doing some work with helping high school athletes and even college and pro athletes all over the country. We're introducing an app where you can check for a CTE, and that's put out. It's FDA approved, cleared through the FDA. We can check if someone has a concussion by this app that we have, and they shake this application form like an iPad, and it tells you if they're registered CTE. It's amazing technology how it's come across, Big C. In the final few minutes as we close, Big C, I just want to say this to you. There's so much happening in the world of sports. We have the All-Star game coming up on Sunday in the great state of New Orleans, Louisiana, Big C. I know they have a lot of beads down there. Are you going to be putting more beads in that Escalade as you make your way down south to the All-Star game, Big C? Are you still vacuuming up beads from the Cadillac, Big C? Yeah.
People know where we've been, and they know that we're well traveled. But maybe can take that trip. It's not as far away as
Yeah.
what it was. I don't. Hopefully, it won't be raining down there. And
Yeah.
even if it does, they got a lot of swamp land.
Oh.
She can get a little coating on top of it down there.
Well, you and Madison Bumgarner, I'm sure you'll have a fun time down there swamping in the south with your big trucks, Big C. And I just want to say that everybody who loves the world of sports, I love what we do with Big C Sports. I see a lot of things that we talk about that are oftentimes repeated, and I just want to encourage everybody, if you have a dream, you got to have a vision. Write your goals down and make them come true. Yeah.
You said there's a lot of things that we say that are repeated.
Oh, yeah.
And the one thing that I want repeated, I want for all the coaches associations in America to call for FBI background checks on youth sports. If you want to plagiarize us on that.
Yeah.
Go out and call for all these national youth organizations to have background checks, FBI background checks, not just your local Rotary Club coming in and having somebody fill out an application and say, yeah, you can coach because you got a whistle.
Yeah.
Let's send them through a stringent background check through the FBI, Charlton, because our youth of America deserve better than what we've been giving them over the decades to release these predators out there on these kids, not knowing what's going on, who's watching, and them victimizing all the youth of America. And I'm talking about gymnastics, baseball, swimming, basketball, football, Charlton. We've got predators out there coaching these youth sports in America. And I call for all these national sports programs. If you want to plagiarize Charlton and Big C Sports, plagiarize us on that. Call for the FBI background check on all youth coaches in America.
Well, Big C, that's a very good point. And speaking of youth, I want to say, just to honor the top 10 in the nation when it comes to boys basketball rankings, we have Nathan Hale of Seattle, Washington, Sierra Canyon, Chatsworth, California, LaMuir of LaPorte, Indiana. Number 4, Memphis East of Memphis, Tennessee. Number 5, IMG Academy out of Florida, followed by number 6, Findlay Prep out of Henderson, Nevada. By number 7, Charter High School out of Philadelphia. Montverde Academy out of Montverde, Florida. Number 9, Oak Hill Academy and Mouth of Wilson, Virginia. Number 10, Chino Hills, California. Big C, in the final 30 seconds, or actually give you a minute to close out Big C Sports. We talked about so many great things with POTUS. We talked about Putin. We talked about, everybody leaving the Trump administration, Conway and Spicer. Who's going to be fired next, Big C? Your thoughts on what we can face coming up this week, Big C?
Well, Charlton, we got a lot of things moving in sports. You got teams struggling in the NBA trying to figure out what are they going to do come the trade deadline? We got the All-Star game fastly approaching.
Yeah.
And we got baseball spring training right around the corner.
Yeah.
But, when we look at everything right now, Charlton, in the world of hockey, I wanted to give a shout-out to the great one, Wayne Gretzky. 30 years ago, we stand in this 30 years theme, Wayne Gretzky had his third consecutive 7-point assist game.
Wow.
He set an NHL record. He had 7 assists in a game, Charlton, and he did it on back-to-back nights. What was so amazing about him, this guy personified what hockey was, and we often forget about great individual performances when somebody goes out and does it on a consistent basis. But when you think about it, having 7 assists in a hockey game, this guy revolutionized hockey. He set the scoring table where it will never be touched. And this is one of those sports where it won't be touched because what he did was just phenomenal. And I just want to say congratulations to the great one, Wayne Gretzky.
Well, Big C, no one says it better than you. I want to say it every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide, full of Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio network, the #1 network in the universe, and also Big C Sports as we voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. We also tell you there's never any excuse for domestic violence. If you see any woman in trouble or someone grabbing her by the crotch, just call 911 because no one should have to deal with that garbage all on their own. And on this Valentine's Day, we want to tell you we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.